Hey, it's Sandy at Life with Zest. Today we're going to talk about what I started calling container prepping. And what's container prepping, you're saying? This is a recipe. Literally, I made it ahead of time. I cubed up some sweet potatoes, some beets, some onions, and some garlic. And anyone who goes in my fridge knows that this is a recipe and it is not to be taken apart. Now, I do the same thing when I have, say, a bag of onions or a big bag of garlic that's already peeled, and I will pull out my food processor and get everything prepped ahead of time. In this case, I pulled out my number 4, which just says 4 mm on the blade. And it's a good size cut. You can see, if you look at my finger, I'll be careful here, but it's a good size cut. And again, when you use a food processor or a mandolin, you're going to get much more evenly cut food. And when you do, it's easier to cook because everything cooks the same rate, right? And this is about the size you're going to get from a 4 mm. It's a good size. So it gives you a nice little crunch. And I yesterday took an onion, took a bunch of what are called stuffer stuffer mushrooms, and they're about this big. And I like those as opposed to the small button ones because they look like them, but they're so much easier to cut up and faster. So I literally had some Brussels sprouts, and that's what really started the whole thing. I was like, what am I going to do with these Brussels sprouts? I started out cooking them whole, and I realized that took forever. And then I started cutting them in half, and that took less time. Recently, I started cutting them into thirds, and yesterday I had a brainstorm. I was like, oh, what if I did those in the food processor? So I literally took a whole bag of Brussels sprouts. Of course, I cut off the bottoms and took off the outside layer of leaves. And then I just loaded them in here as high as I could. You make sure that you snap everything in place. Load up as many of the Brussels sprouts as I could. It took me, I say, in 2 times in here, maybe 20 seconds. And then I cut up the onions and the mushrooms, and I put them all in their little containers. And later on last night, I pulled them out of the refrigerator. I had a little rubber band around them as well. And I sauteed them up. And it cooked in like 15 minutes. It was so great. And then I always have chicken on hand. At least once a week, I will bake a whole chicken. And in this case, I just took a chunk, just a chunk of like the size of a breast of chicken, and I shredded it. And the easiest way to shred a protein is just to take 2 forks and just pull on the protein. So I literally sauteed this all up, the Brussels sprouts, the onions, the mushrooms, all together, threw in some salt and pepper, in some coconut oil, and then at the last minute, I threw in the cooked chicken and warmed it up, and I had a meal in like 15 minutes, and it was delicious. We sat down, a well-rounded protein with greens and some good spice in there. Of course, I put a little bit of hot pepper in there, of course. But can you see how easy that is when you prep just a little bit ahead of time? So this week, all you need to do is write down 2 to 3 things that you use on a regular basis that you can prep. Mine always comes down to onions and garlic. Anything I start in the saute starts with coconut oil, onions, and garlic, and everything goes from there. So it could be ginger or turmeric or some other things. Mushrooms are very common in our house as well. And as I'd said before, if you have a whole bag of onions, just prep the whole thing, and then you can throw it into the freezer. You can either do one whole big bag, or you can do some separate ones so you can pull them out for any kind of baked or sauteed items that you've got. And can you imagine if you had all those onions and mushrooms and garlic already prepped and ready to go? Then all you need to do is grab a green. You can actually do that with the greens too. You can do that with broccoli or Brussels sprouts or any of those, and throw them into bags in the freezer. Or you can even combine them in a bag in the freezer. So all you have to do is pull out that bag, throw in some coconut oil, saute it all up, and then add a protein. And if you're like me and you make a chicken, or if you have a protein already in the refrigerator, then all you have to do is just shred it up and add it to it, and you are done in 15 minutes. So I look forward to seeing your list. your 2 or 3 things that you are going to prep this week. Whatever day you choose or evening that you choose, make sure you just take a little bit of time to do it because it's going to save you so much time in the long run. Sandy checking out. Hope you have a Life with Zesty day. See you on the next one.